Well, hello, everyone watching. Hello, Paullina Simons.
Hello, Sally
beside
Hepworth.
I am beside myself to meet you, to be talking with you on the Australian launch of Light in Lavelle. We're going to talk about this in a second. This beautiful cover, this beautiful story from you. First, not that anyone needs it, I'm going to tell everyone a little bit about you. Of course, Paullina Simons is the author of 15 internationally best-selling novels, one non-fiction memoir, a cookbook, and two children's books. Born and raised in the former Soviet Union, Paullina immigrated with her family to the United States in the mid-70s. She received her bachelor's degree in political science from Kansas University, and she's lived in Rome, London, Dallas, and now in New York with her husband and four children. So thank you so much for talking with me, Paullina. I have to say so many things, but the first one is that I have to thank you because I have been an author for quite some time now, and my good friends are entirely unmoved by it. They don't think I'm cool. They don't think that anything I've done is impressive. And last week, when I messaged my group chat of my oldest girlfriends and said, I'm interviewing Paullina Simons, everyone lost their minds. And now I'm a rock star. so thank you for that. I have been elevated in everyone's eyes, I think, now that I'm reading this. And I'm going to do the gush that I'm assuming everyone does. Tully was the book of my adolescence. It was the book that made me fall in love with reading. It was so important to me as a reader, as a writer, as a woman. And the character of Tully has stayed with me ever since. And then it started my love affair with you, because from there, I have read all of your books. Everyone, I'm sure, talks about The Bronze Horseman, but every single one of your books, Red Leaves, all of the trilogies that have come, have just been so magical. I really think that you are one of the great writers of our time, and I can't believe that we get to have this conversation. So
I
thank
cannot
you.
believe we're having this conversation, and I thank you deeply, so much for saying all these beautiful, wonderful things. Thank you so much, Sally. It's a real honor for me, to, to talk to you, especially. I mean, because you are a journalist, you're also a writer and a novelist, but because you have such a personal connection to my books, it makes the conversation more intimate, I think, and more special. So I really thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. It's an honor for me. And the way, I think, for those watching, that we have connected now is that we share a publisher with Macmillan Australia and Alex Lloyd, who, when I discovered that this book was coming out imminently, I got very upset with him for not sending me an early copy because I am such a mega fan, and I was lucky enough to twist his arm and get one, and it only unfortunately arrived in my hands this morning, and so I know where today is
Yeah.
going as soon as we finish. But the exciting part about that is that you get to tell me about. I was going to say sell it. You don't need to sell it to me. I will read anything that you write ever. But can you tell me, and I guess people watching, tell me about this book? And I understand that it actually ties in a little bit with some of your personal history. So maybe tell us a bit about what the book is about, and then, where it came from.
Okay, so Light at Lavelle is a story of Finn and Isabel. Finn is an American. He's a banker. He's got a very successful life, and Isabel is a farm woman in Ukraine, living her small but very happy life, doing her things. And both of them, at the crux of the 20th century, lose their life. He loses his successful life because the crash of 1929 wipes out all of his former glory, all of his successes, and he literally overnight is suddenly finds himself struggling to even keep a roof over his family's heads, while she is, of course, encounters a different kind of evil in the form of people who want to come and take her land. And so they're thousands of miles away. And the story of Light at Lavelle is, how do these two people somehow manage to come together, to meet each other, and start their new path, their new journey together, as a woman who speaks no English, who has ostensibly few skills that can be useful in the new country where she finds herself, and Finn is a man who's got 1,000 things that he's thinking about, and the last thing that he needs in his life is this enigmatic, beautiful, mysterious, mystifying creature who basically lands at his doorstep, and he has to, take her in. And so the book is the story of their struggle and their past, present, and future life, and their journey together and apart, and how Isabel managed to come to America and meet him, and what happened to him, and how he was in a place where he was able to help her, and all of that together. It sort of goes down the path of when they both have lost everything, what do they have besides, this sort of feeling of strength inside themselves, and slowly and gradually each other.
Okay, well, everyone's now left because they've just gone to buy the book, and or they have just downloaded it and they're now reading it. Oh my goodness.
I'm so excited. It's so exciting. So there's a lot in this book, that there's just a lot of everything in this. Yeah.
And I feel like it is just the book that we need right now, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I am wanting to be swept up in, as you say, like, it's a thick book. It's not too thick. It's the kind of book that you want to get lost in, and that you can just settle in and be swept away. And,
Well, that's right. Well, how books generally for us is a means sometimes of leaving our world. Like, often when we, for example, in our life, if we are dealing with sickness, right, or illness or heartbreak, sometimes the last thing at that moment that we need is to read about something similar, our own experience. But it's interesting to read about other people suffering. So it's interesting to read. So maybe in that way, it was born. The book really came alive during the pandemic, because so many people had lost everything, and suddenly, it seemed topical. And plus, of course, all the stuff that's happening with Ukraine, it also seemed interesting because of that. But generally speaking, it still took me away into another world. It took me somewhere else where, where I really wanted to be, which is with them. Which is kind of where you want to be with your characters. And I certainly wanted to be with them when I was writing about them. So, and thinking about them even before I wrote about it. It's a little bit like, William Goldman, who wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He said that he thought about and researched and took notes for the movie for 8 years, from like the early 60s until 1968, and then wrote the entire script in 3 weeks. So that's maybe like me. I've been thinking about the book since like 2007, since 2000, maybe since the publication of The Summer Garden. I thought, I think Ukraine needs its own story. And I thought of Finn, and I thought of Isabel, and so many other things have happened, but it really came alive during the during the pandemic.
Oh God, I have so many questions. Like, my writer's brain and my mega fan brain is wanting to answer them all, and they're getting but they're getting all tangled up in my head. I guess probably the main one is, where did these characters come from? Is it they sound like people I want to hang out with. I am going to hang out with them later today. Where did they come from, and why is it these characters that are in this story?
So it was interesting to me to develop the fish out of water story, and I guess as an immigrant, maybe now, if I think about it, maybe a lot of my stories are kind of like that, where a person doesn't know how to deal with a certain situation, comes into that situation, and little by little learns. And so here it was another interesting thing. Isabel comes into a world where she seems very much like a fish out of water. But what they don't realize is that she's the magician. She is the one that has skills that they don't even understand. She's also lived a life that they don't even understand. They all think that they have sufferings, but what she has endured, and she doesn't let on that she has endured anything, because on the outside she remains very kind and compassionate and calm and funny, but inside there's all this strife inside her, all this sadness, and little by little it comes out. So I just thought it was a very interesting way of uh, just juxtaposing these two different things, like a man who thinks that he's confident and he's full of himself and he knows what everything is, and he suddenly has nothing. And she suddenly, she comes into his world, and she seems to have all the answers, though he doesn't know it yet.
Oh my God. I think that is something that echoes in all of your books, is this, the strength of women. And I think from Tully to Franz Horseman to, throughout your books, and that's what makes them uplifting even through tragedy, in my mind, that you get to see what, and obviously I'm a woman, but there are some amazing male characters too, but what women can endure, and the strength of women throughout history is something that's so empowering to read about when times are difficult in the world.
And I feel that she is one of my best creations, Isabel, just because she's got this shell of kindness to her, and inside she's made of steel, but it hasn't made her hard or unlikable. It's she's still a kind, lovely person, but just inside there's that that thing that she herself doesn't want to deal with and doesn't want to acknowledge, and yet it's always present. So I do think that there's a sense of that grit teeth inner strength that sometimes permeates my books. But also, Sally, have you also noticed though that, so when in the Bronze Horseman, when during the blockade, right, when it's 7 o'clock in the morning and somebody's got to get up to go get the family their bread, and nobody wants to get out of bed because it's cold, and there's no fire, and there's no wood, and nobody wants to do it. And Tatiana, right, she's got to get up, and she says, "Is anybody coming with me?" And they're like all in bed, and they're like, "Well, you're already up, so you might as well go." But that's also really human. That's also something we understand really well when we ourselves are sick and starving and weak, and we don't want to get out of bed. It's not that we judge them a little bit for not helping her, but we understand them too. So I like that there are, like, my heroines, have this. Tully certainly did, right? That inner strength that kept her going. Tatiana did, and here Isabel most certainly does, but she just does it. I would say the thing about her that I love is that she just does it with kindness. She's still inside, but on the outside, she's kindness, which I kind of like.
Oh, it's female power and strength, isn't it? And I actually think the example with Tatiana is such a good one of how your books transform from when she, at the beginning of the book, goes on the bus instead of, following her. And this is not a spoiler. If you haven't read Bronze Horseman, anyone listening, then this does not spoil anything. But of course you have already read it. And then she learns to survive. She goes and seeing these female characters transform, I think, is something that I find so empowering. And that actually, have you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to say, I just wanted to acknowledge that, because I do think that the difficulty, it's not, I mean, it's also very good to portray a person who is strong from the get-go and does strong things. But it's another thing to portray somebody who has grave weaknesses and somehow still pulls herself up, and because most of us are kind of like that, I would say. Most of us have struggles, right? Most of us have moments where we don't want to get out of bed, where we absolutely don't want to face our day, where we have a lot of hardship, much of it coming from inside our own souls, and yet somehow something in our soul still gets us to get up and go do it. So I
Yes.
do like that very much.
And I think that
You
that
know,
is, a lot of people talk about how dreamy Alexander is, which he very much is. But I think that it is it's the strength of Tatiana for me, and Tully, and
yes.
that is, I think, the real power of your book.
Yes, and
And
right, and the same thing with Julian in End of Forever. I also felt that very strongly
yes,
about him, is that he was a man who thought he couldn't do anything. I can't do this. I can't go. I'm blind in one eye. I can't do it. I can't go there. And yet, what he does for the love of the woman that he's lost and he's trying to find is and nothing short of extraordinary. So I like that very much, that you kind of begin saying, oh, I can't do it, and then you just kind of end up doing it.
yeah. Well, I think that actually ties in really well. I noticed the epigraph in this story, and I wrote it down, and it's from an unknown source, and it says, "Fate whispers to the warrior, you cannot withstand the storm, and the warrior whispers back, I am the storm." Can you tell me about? I just love that. Can you tell me
I love that too.
how did that
So much.
come?
Well,
Yeah,
and
tell
well,
me.
Alex will laugh at me, Sally, because I had other things that left him very lukewarm. I had, what about this? And Alex was, it's really very tepid. And then he'd say, like, I'm not crazy about it. And then the copy editor would also say this. Think about how late this is. We're like maybe 2 months away from going to print, and both my publisher and the production editor who's working in the book, say, yeah, I'm not crazy about that. So
Oh no.
I'm like, where? Yeah, so we still couldn't. But when I read that, I was like, no, that's perfection, because it
It's perfection.
describes so well the struggles of all the main characters in the book. Not everybody who's I mean, think about the great crash of 1929, and also the Russian Revolution. It comes, they didn't ask for it. It came. You thought it was all in the cities, but suddenly they came to the farms of Ukraine and said, you've got to do it our way or you're going to die. And they're like, that's and also the woman and in Finn's life, the triangle part of the three main characters in that book, Vanessa, she also finds herself, suddenly everything was taken care of for her. Somebody always took care of everything, and suddenly they have lost their money. They might not be able to keep their house. Her husband clearly looks like he's distraught and destroyed, and she doesn't know what to do, and yet she also has to find the strength to carry on. So there is a lot of fate that's happening in there that's out of the control of the main characters, and the only thing that they can control is what they do. What they do about it. I'm just like, I always think I'm inspired by by Michael J. Fox, who certainly didn't ask for what he was given, but in his
Yeah.
books he's very inspirational about this very thing, is that you never ask for the bad things that happen, and you really struggle with it. You grieve the loss of your life, but then you have to say, what kind of a person am I? Am I going to be defined by something else? And then he was, and Finn is, and Isabel is, and Vanessa is. So I like that very much. I like that quote just because it represented to me that feeling of the personal and the fate colliding. That it's coming and it's bad, and then the human being says, "Okay, I'm going to be ready for it."
Oh, I love that.
I like
And
that.
I haven't read Michael J. Fox's book. I read
Yeah.
a book called Option B by Sheryl Sandberg recently, which has got a similar
Yes, I read that
thing.
too.
You
Yeah,
did, yeah. Which
I did, of
based,
course, because I read it because she lost her husband. It was a
yes,
terrible thing. She wrote one book, Lean In, right? That was a huge bestseller.
yes.
And then after she was on top of the world in this freak thing, she lost the love of her life. And option B is how she dealt with it. And I really, the personal stuff in there I really, really liked when she talked about her own grief and how to cope with this and this really inexpressible loss.
Yeah, and the loss of control, which you talk about,
Yes,
in wartime and in,
yes,
an illness or a death.
illness. Yeah,
And that's what, in some ways, your books take us to another time, or a lot of them do, and another time period, and yet they feel so relevant today to all of us. Do you see any parallels that you can draw between Light and Lavelle and time today, or things that you think people might resonate with
very
people?
much so. Very much so because again, think about the pandemic. We didn't ask for it. We didn't ask for all of our businesses to be closed. It was
Mm,
very difficult for a lot of people. They lost their jobs, right? Restaurants closed, businesses closed down, the world was shut down. What do people do when they depend on going to work for a living and say they work in a restaurant or in the service industry? The hotels are closed, right? The amusement parks are closed. Well, I mean, unless people stop driving everywhere. I can see it at every level, and things were very hard, and yet people still had to say, "Okay, I'm going to get pick myself up, and I'm going to keep going." I think that that's very, very powerful, which is why I think that the story, and because Light at Lavelle really came to life during the pandemic. Like I had another book that I was actually thinking of writing, a World War II thrilling adventure story with women freedom fighters in Belgium trying to help these lost American paratroopers that that get lost in Belgium, and the freedom fighters and the paratroopers have to help them do their super secret mission to literally stop Hitler, or Hitler is going to destroy the world. It's like
Oh
so I
my
was
gosh, you
kind of
should write
writing.
that one next.
Really, you think so,
Yes,
Alex? What do you think of that? No,
please do.
so I was in the middle. I was in the middle of this story, or like in the beginning of, but really reading about it next, and then this other thing kept coming to me. Kept coming to me. I just
Yeah.
was thinking about, because of the Great Depression, and because of losing everything, and because of life just turning on a dime, kind of
Yeah.
like October 29th. Yesterday was October 29th, which is when the great crash of 1929 happened,
Mm.
and it just uh, uh, reordered people. I guess that's what I want to say. In the pandemic, reordered people. And it clearly reordered me, because I was going one way, and now I've turned, and I have like a new lease on life because of this book. I found Alex. Because of this book, I found a new publisher.
Mm.
I really think that, like, many wonderful things have happened that would not have happened. I mean, and this is what I still would have preferred that we didn't have the pandemic. But
Yeah.
you can't, and that's what I mean about the warrior, and you cannot withstand the storm. Is you cannot control.
Yes.
You cannot control Parkinson's. You cannot control the
No.
pandemic. It happens. The only thing you can control is what you do about it.
Yes.
And I
And
think that that's why the book is relevant.
yes, extremely relevant. And I think, speaking of control, it's interesting that you pivoted from another book that you were thinking of writing. And I wonder, and you may have read, there's a book by Elizabeth Gilbert, Big Magic, where she talks about how the books almost choose you, and that she speaks of a genius, like we all have a genius above us, and that she has had an idea for a book that she ended up shelving, and then to write a different book. And then she bumped into Anne Patchett, I think it was, who said she was in the middle of writing almost the same book that Elizabeth Gilbert had in mind. Like, it was almost an identical story. And and Elizabeth Gilbert's take on it was that that book had found her unavailable to write it. And so it had gone and found another genius and another writer to write it.
Oh,
And
I
this
really
idea that
like that a lot.
ideas are
I
flitting
love
around
that.
and they're saying, right, I'm going to choose Paullina Simons to write this. Oh, no, she's otherwise occupied. I might take it over here. And I think because there is a sort of magic, and there's hard work, the magic and hard work about writing, but that magic part, my writer's brain can sort of see that. Can yours, that
Yeah, of
these
course
books
you
choose
can.
us?
Of course you can. But also because some of it is revelation, and some of
Yeah.
it is a magic that's outside of yourself, because you think you're doing this thing, and suddenly the thing that you're supposed to be doing chooses you.
Yes.
I do think I remember I was in Australia in 2007, and I met an Aboriginal man in Perth, and he gave me one of these little rocks into my hand, and when he shook my hand, and he said, um, you still haven't written the thing that you're meant to write. And I was like, this is after the Bronze Horseman, after Tatiana Alexander, after Tully, after the Summer Garden. I said, what are you talking about? He says, I'm telling you, you just have to find it inside yourself. It's still in there. It's not come out yet. And so, but since then,
And this is
I've written
it.
but since then I've written 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 10 books. And every book that I write, I'm like, is this the one? Is this the one? Wait a minute. Is this the one he was talking about? But I keep writing and publishing and wondering, is this the one? But this one, when I finished it and wrote it, I wept. I just felt that I used the most of my vital powers to do the best I could do to bring Finn and Isabel to life, and they were so alive inside me that I didn't want to leave them. I was mourn them, was sad to let them go.
Well, these books bless so many people. I mean, they have blessed me, and I truly, I'm really fangirling, but I truly can't describe the effect that your books have had on me over my lifetime, and I'm sure they're the reason that I became a writer. As a reader, they have been so empowering. As a woman, and I just am so grateful that you keep
wonderful
telling these stories. I've got a feeling, and from the whispers that I've heard, that this is the one that that man was talking about. But just in case,
well,
I want you to keep writing more and more and more, because
yes.
frankly, I think they're all, books that just needed to be out there and needed to be read, and that make humanity a little bit softer and kinder, and looking for, the love. And I think that's something that is sorely needed.
I think looking for the love in this book has a tremendous, profound, like just soul altering love in it. And it's sort of the fire underneath this entire book there, the profound feeling that I had for these characters as I was writing them, but also the profound emotion that they felt for each other. I do think that there was, for me at least, there was something very powerful and very special about this couple and these characters. So I mean, I hope this is the beginning of its journey in the world. So I'm really hoping. So far, I've gotten the publisher, of course, and Alex and my copy editor, and then my production editor. The people who were closest to the book, who really have to work on the book to make it better, which is a little bit hard, right? It's not the same as you reading for pleasure. It's like me looking at your book saying, Sally, where are the commas? Or that's the wrong word, or you've used this word already 4 times. Stop it.
They say that a lot
whatever.
to me.
Something, yeah, exactly. Yeah, something is wrong, right? It's not the same, but it's reading. It's the proofreader putting down her tools and just reading it through to the end, because she said, I cannot proof the book because all I'm doing is trying to read the words. And I was like, what better compliment can you get, right? That's pretty special.
Yeah, there's no better compliment, and I'm not surprised. And it releases in Australia today, Light at Lavelle. Readers are going to see it everywhere. This is Paullina Simons' newest, best book that's coming your way Paullina, I'm going to have to get in touch with you again when I have read it, so I can just
Please.
unpack every single little bit. And
Yes,
I'm going to come and stalk you when I'm in New York
that
next
would be
year.
so wonderful. Oh, I would
And
love that so much. I would love that. I would love to meet you. I would love to meet you. That would be my honor.
well, thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for
Thank
writing
you.
this book and all of these books. And I just can't wait to see what's coming next for you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for talking. It was a real pleasure for me. Thank you, Sally.
It was my
Thank you
pleasure.
so, so much.
Bye.